So we'll get started. Just first to go around, I'm gonna have you guys, I'm loud, so I don't use a mic. I don't know if you guys want a mic. But we're gonna have you start at the end. Who's on the end?
Karen Montalbano, Bolton Civic Association, past president, currently government liaison.
Debbie Kavanagh, President of Central Islip Coalition of Good Neighbors.
Rita Fernandez, Project Director of the State of Black Long Island Equity Council, which is a project convened by the Urban League of Long Island.
Lou Bukowski, I'm the Director of Environmental Planning at VHB and the former Deputy Commissioner of Economic Development Planning for Suffolk County.
Marcos Maldonado, Brentwood Community Advocate, and also grant writer for the project.
And I am Swan Weber, the Assistant Director here at Vision Long Island. Posting this little So what we're gonna do is just, I wanna get a chance to, how many of you guys are actual, and don't get insulted by the question, how many of you guys are actual community activists? Like you're involved in some form of civic, chamber, community group? Okay, because I just need to know if we need to change our language for newbies, but you guys seem like you know what to do here. Great, sweet. So we can get to the nitty gritty of this and really get started and hopefully have some very productive conversations going on and engage. So I do want to point out, as I had mentioned, we do have a board member in the room with us, Mr. Anthony Bartone. Wave your hand.
I'll stop again, right?
And I'm gonna have you guys clap for him because he is one of the few developers that we do have that stayed through the day, decided to join this panel, and is doing things actively the right way in communities. So we are going to defer to you from time to time. So I hope you plan on
That's
leaving.
a warning.
No
He's
Kahlua
got
in here.
his-
So tread gently.
We've got some Coca-Cola, that's all exactly we have. But, so we have one more panelist that just joined us.
Hi, Linda Hanger, Kings Park Civic.
And
And Vision Long Island.
we all get suckered into this. So quick thing about myself, I am formerly the civic president of Gordon Heights Civic Association and the head of the Gordon Heights Visioning Steering Committee and Gordon Heights Coalition of Organizations. So I will speak a bit from my civic perspective more so than Vision Long Island in this capacity. So what I want to just put out to our panelists, I want to invite each one of them to kind of just, in a minute or less, just give an update of something in your area that you feel is a highlight success that you don't see happening every day on Long Island, whether it's a community you live in, work in, or entertain, experience, have life in. So we'll start on the end. Karen, go ahead.
Okay, so we got the big one. We got the Downtown Revitalization Initiative grant from New York State this year for $10 million. We're currently working on that. But we also have so many different things in the pipeline. We have a zoning overlay that the town of Hempstead is putting in that has to still be finalized, and we're hoping that's going to be finalized by the end of this year or the beginning of next year. We have a complete streets program. We have a couple of other things, studies and things, drainage program. We've been very, very active, and I think we're finally seeing a culmination of what we have been active trying to do.
Linda?
Well, Kings Park. We're on the map now. I've been in the community a long time, and we've really made a lot of headway in the last few years. And it's taken a while, and it took a lot of different pieces. For communities to thrive, you need residents and business to work together. Has to be chamber working hand in hand with civics, with community. And you can get anything accomplished. One of the missing pieces we had for several years was in government. We all loved our old supervisor, but he used to say, good government, slow government. It was kind of backwards government. But through the help of Vision, quite frankly, we're getting sewers. We've got a downtown plan happening. We've got concert series. Kings Park is really up and coming, and it took a lot of pieces to put it together, but, you know, we're on the right track. So everyone, you know, keep an eye on us.
Okay, Central Islip, one of our successes was the Kaboom Playground with Disney. We worked with Vision On. We did a 500 people park build. That was our big success. Our second thing is we got the GRI last year, so we have our $10 million project that we've been working on too. So that takes from Smith Street north up to the railroad track. But then we have all this new development that's going to be going on south of Smith Street with Jobco wanting to build additional housing. Still do not know what Steel Equity is doing. They're purchasing the 87 acres of tech property. I've met with them once. We'll be happy to meet with them again. I know they've been turned down twice by the town because originally they wanted to do all industrial, which if you ever drove down Carlton Avenue, you cannot handle. But when I start sitting there and I add up all the developers and all the housing units coming into Central Islip, at this point I'm adding up over 2,000 units of housing, which I kind of think for Central Islip is overkill because we don't have the street capacity to maintain it. And one of the biggest problems that I'm seeing right now is dealing with the town to recognize and deal with the fire department, what they need to do for their substation. The ambulance department needs another substation. The school district needs another school building, because when I first started teaching in Central Islip, class sizes were at 20. When I retired last year, class sizes were up to 42.
Wow.
And that's because we've become the sanctuary, one of the sanctuary cities of all the undocumented students coming into Suffolk County. But the class sizes are quite large. The other thing that we're working on is to deal with, to get the community more actively involved in what has to be done. So I work with the town. They don't always like what I have to say, which is okay with me. But, and I work closely also as a civic leader with the police department to deal with stuff like the gang issues. In fact, I'm now sitting on a task force with Suffolk County Police Chiefs on grant writing for anti-gang programs for Suffolk, CI and Brentwood. I'm one of the 2 people that they asked to sit on the committee that I know of. So we'll be meeting come January. So I have my hands into just about everything that goes on within the community.
So the Urban League, we don't represent really one community. We're region-wide, Nassau and Suffolk counties, and our mission is to empower communities. So one big success would be the launch of the equity profile of Long Island that we released in 2017. And for those that don't know, that was a report that found that because of racial inequities or disparities across many different areas, Long Island was losing money in GDP, $24 billion. And that is disparities in education, economics, transportation, air quality, environment, health. And so the idea is that if we eliminate those disparities, we can help the region be stronger, because basically we're saying we're giving individuals more access and more ability to take advantage of the economic vitality of our region. So if you don't have sick people, they can go to work. If you don't have students getting suspended, you can be unfairly, you can be assured that you have a workforce pipeline. Those are just 2 examples. One initiative that we engaged with the Suffolk County Police Department on last year was the Suffolk County Police Department test. And there were disparities in that test in that people of color, Black and Latinos, did not necessarily take the test. So they put out a big campaign to increase the numbers of Black and Latino that were applying for the test. So we partnered with some community organizations and of course the police department in doing events to have people, learn more about this as a potential career, being a police as a potential career, dispel some of the myths, and also just encourage them to take the test right on the spot. And I forget the number right now, somebody here might know the number, but the police department did say that this year was the largest number of applicants that they received to take the test. So we consider that a big win. Because for us, that leads to career paths and living wage jobs for more of our residents across the region, even though this was Suffolk County in particular, but across Suffolk County. So our goal is to help create these pathways, living wage jobs, so more people, more Long Island residents can take part in the vitality of our region. Thank you.
So I have probably a little bit of a different perspective, not being on a civic. We, as an engineering and planning firm, we represent a lot of developers who go into communities with ideas. And we also represent a lot of the towns and villages who are doing master plans. For example, we've heard about the DRI a lot. We're actually the state's consultant for the DRI process this year from Long Island. We're working with the Baldwin community, working with the Kings Park community. So we kind of have both, or experience in both viewpoints. I think for me, so not having maybe one project, but for me, I think the big success that I've seen is just the way that our clients are approaching communities. They're doing it earlier, and they're doing it more often, and a more thorough job of it, where maybe 20 years ago, developers would come with an idea, and it would go right to the town board, and the community would feel left out of that process. I think you're now seeing developers who really understand the value that having a community input very early on in the process can bring to their project, and it helps them create more certainty and build support for everyone. So I think you're seeing a real transition in that all over the island.
Yeah, so in Brentwood, we've had a number of successes. I mean, one of the biggest successes came in 2018, and it was really centered around state investment in what we had coming to the community. In 2018, the state announced that $15 million would be coming to create a new community center in the Brentwood area. Now, if we've all been paying attention to the news in the last couple of years, of course, Brentwood has had its fair share of headlining issues to deal with, right? And in a way, this investment was the state acknowledging that the Brentwood community has been clamoring for some specific community space for quite some time, right? Brentwood actually has a lot of very well-run youth-serving organizations, right? And a lot of great community organizations doing good work on the ground. And the consensus among all of those organizations is that there is not enough safe supervised areas for young children to congregate. So they came together in a series of meetings led by a number of elected officials and community-wide meetings to come up with a punch list, if you will, a priority list of what they would like to see come in. And one of those big things was the community center. So definitely a success in terms of state listening to nonprofits and leaders in the community with the needs that they have and wanting to express. And I'll touch on another point from a community standpoint. Success looks like when you go into Brentwood, you see 100 community organizations all trying to fit a piece of the puzzle in order to make that community vibrant. Whether it's arts and culture, youth services, or after-school programming, and sometimes you have great organizations that do all three. But we do have an active and vibrant nonprofit organization community in Brentwood, and one of the biggest successes that we've seen, as I mentioned, came in 2018 with the announcement of those funds coming in for enhanced and much bigger community centers.
So I'm going to pose this question to the community organizations just for a moment. The one thing that you all said you had in common was that you recently received state funding. I'm sorry, all four community groups. So just for a side note, Linda, I'm going to put you on the spot for a second. in your remarks to this question, I know that at one point Vision Long Island was involved prior to me being at Vision. You guys had done a visioning process and it was unsuccessful because the community was not ready to buy into the vision at that point. And now that's very much changed with this new vision that you had. So my question to you, to each of you, is a two-part question, and I'm going to try and keep the time limit because we do want to make sure people get the information, but you all get a chance to speak. If you can say it again in a minute or less, how much of a catalyst was the state funding to kick off other parts of your visioning? And what would you say was the biggest challenge to getting that funding?
Well,
Go ahead.
with Kings Park, the funding did not come first. The story in a nutshell was the Chamber and the Civic got together and said, you know, we need downtown revitalization. Steve Ballone, County Exec Ballone, had spoken with us. We had a meeting, and he goes, look, the hardest thing about getting sewers or any revitalization of downtown is getting community and business to work together. And he goes, if you get that done, if you have a clear vision of where you want your town to go, the money will come. And I remember arguing with him. Like, I'm the only one in the meeting, constantly arguing. And he goes, no, I promise you, I promise you. And he was right. And it took us getting together. And what we did was, we did it a little interestingly. We didn't invite any elected officials to any of our community meetings, and we had many of them. We got the community in, we brought Eric and Tawana and Envision, and they helped us do a vision for where we want the town to go. Then we brought that to government, and then government accepted that, and then we got the money, then we got the 20 million. So it really wasn't funding first, it was desire, need, and commitment first.
Okay. Karen?
So, Baldwin is, for those who may not know it, a hamlet in between two villages, which have their own self-determination, the village of Rockville Center and the village of Freeport. We are just south of Hempstead. We are a diverse community. People don't know what to do with us. I swear. We have people, I think 40% of our population are college graduates. We have a median income of $100,000 or more. It's a pretty good community. But when you look at the racial makeup, they don't know what to do with it. And it's been like that for a long time. What happened was we had a downtown project that was going on. It's now coming up on over 20 years. And Breslin came along and wanted to put in a CVS. And we didn't want a CVS on that corner. We wanted to see something better. And that's how we got involved with Vision, because we wanted transit-oriented development. We went out and we protested, and we invited Vision in. We never had a visioning statement. That's how far town of Hempstead was with us. So what we have done is we have just been working together, people gathering together and finding a vision, and finding it in different ways. One of my co-workers in the BCA developed a community garden. We've been bringing up different things within the community. She's out there doing planters and things. We go to meetings and we develop this thing of, talking to people and finding out. The money came after we did all of it. The 20-year project, they kept trying to do the same thing, didn't work. Finally, we convinced the town not only to do a zoning overlay for that area, but to expand the zoning overlay up our main street of Grand Avenue. So our biggest challenge has been that we've had to do it ourselves. We got the zoning overlay. I remember going 7 years ago for a HUD proposal for an infill redevelopment grant. From the infill redevelopment grant, we got complete streets study. From the complete streets study, we got a complete streets program, which is supposed to be happening this spring. From the complete streets, they saw the community was interested in doing this. We got a downtown commercial corridor resiliency study, which gave us proposals. We're working with some of that. We keep working and chipping away at different things. The money came to us after New York State looked and said, wow, you guys have some interesting, innovative things going on, and you're ready to move. And that's how we ended up with getting the grant this year. So our challenges have been that it's had to be work on the ground to get to where we are. And we're still working on it. We still have, you know, the zoning overlay that has been proposed is this close to being passed. It was supposed to be passed by now. We're waiting. New York State is not happy. I think they're going to give it a little more nudge into it. We got it. We're getting a changeover in our town leadership. Not sure where that's going to affect us. Hopefully, they keep saying it's not going to. But we'll be there, just keep watching and trying to make sure that we're going smoothly into the future.
Okay, in CI, the grant was worked on with the supervisor for 3 years. We submitted the grant proposal 3 times. We kept going back and we kept tweaking it. She worked with a bunch of the civic leaders in town. She's very instrumental. Our planning department went above and beyond what they had to do to get the thing approved. So we kind of took it from a different aspect. We wrote the grant first, what we wanted to accomplish in our downtown. A lot of what we wanted to accomplish was to get new storefronts in, because currently on our main street is bail bondsmen, lawyers. So we wanted to go away from that. We wanted to put other stuff on our street because we got the federal courthouse in town. We just needed to move. What I will tell you is the state's biggest proposal, and they kept shoving at us, was housing, housing, housing. We really want storefronts, we want restaurants in the area. State wanted housing. So every project that got approved by the state has a housing component tied into the storefront component. But it took us 3 years to get the grant proposal.
Yeah, so I think here's some of the challenges, right? It's when you have so many invested stakeholders trying to come to a consensus about what's most important for the community. So we're gonna have, you know, in Brentwood in particular, you have some people who want transit-oriented development. There was a plan done for transit-oriented development about 8 years ago in and around the train station community. That was panned by one particular group of invested stakeholders as going to flood the streets. Then, as we all know, Brentwood is, you know, maybe home to what would be Long Island's largest development, and that would be Heartland. Well, we have 8 different stakeholders, all with different varying opinions. So, and this might sound true for a lot of the other groups and individuals here who are trying to get collaboration on projects. It's what is most important, what is that number one thing that each group wants? And that's where the sweet spot is. So yes, I'm young, I want stuff where I can walk around. My mom still lives in the same community she raised me. She doesn't want that much traffic because she's worried about having to cross the street. You know, these are two, while they're very divergent, there's 2 very, very pertinent concerns. So in Brentwood, because we have such a high number of very interested folks, where we're having trouble is coming up with a good consensus on how to move forward. And, you know, I'm sure there's a solution in there somewhere. Might take some rice and beans.
Gotta believe.
Vision is all for that. We do take that as not from our board members though. Right. So I wanted to just have a moment to go through that for the community people, because we saw very similar responses where communities had an idea of what they wanted, and sometimes everybody was yelling they wanted the same thing but not using the same language. So what happens is that politicians either use that as a scapegoat to say, you know what, you all are on the same page, come back to me when you are, or they get to pick which one they want to work with that fits their agenda and their timeline and their campaign goals. So with all of these, what you've seen has been consistent is that once the community came together, and I don't even mean Vision Long Island as the, catalyst for this, But once the communities came together on one page and started to develop a vision, that's when things fall in line. And with each time, that was rewarded with, in these cases, funding from the state. We got the Kaboom grant for the playgrounds to get done. You got Complete Streets legislation passed and running through. We've got sewer money coming in. Once you start to get that unified vision that they know they're safe to move forward on, then everybody wants to be a champion. So that's one of the things that, like, at today's theme, if you take nothing else from this, getting your community on one accord, and it doesn't matter who wears 12 hats versus the person wearing one. Like, you really have to have that unified voice that can't be divided on what you want. Once that happens, that's the catalyst for everything moving forward. And that's when you'll get what vision said. What we say of vision is that we do not come into community unless the community has three things, 2 out of 3 things. The community has to agree with, we have to have community people, elected officials, and a developer. And 2 out of the 3 have to at least agree on what they're looking for. The third one we can usually work with and sway or re-educate or work into the group somehow. But if it's not at least 2 out of those 3, it's not gonna happen. If you have community groups fighting with each other, elected officials disconnected from what the real root issues are, or developers who are only reading what they see, and no offense to anyone here from Newsday, but Newsday or any other media outlet or Facebook post or social media of what that community's about, they're not gonna come in. You've got 4 very different communities right here that are having the same challenges, but once they came up with the same solution, they've got the same results and progress. So it's a universal answer, is my point to you guys. So I'm gonna come back to you too, because I have a question for you. But Anthony, I'm gonna put you on the spot for that. So as a developer, we first started working with you, my role with you at Vision was when you started to work in Farmingdale. And since then, the communities and the different experiences that you've had as a developer looking to do mixed use, looking to build the right way and get community input and have that community relationship first before you throw a plan at them, are you willing to listen to their plans and incorporate that? How successful has that been for you as far as having a developer starting with community first versus trying to go through the municipal process first?
Well, Farmingdale's successes, I think, are self-evident. So what I think is a better kind of case study in that is, and some may have tracked some of the press we got over the past year on an application we had in Lynbrook that got very politicized. And we did it the wrong way. We didn't do it very intelligently, admittedly. So we withdrew that application, scrapped it, and went back to the drawing board. And listening to what the community said on air, so it's twofold. It's not just what to do, but where to do it. So we listened to where the community was saying when they were opposing our first application of where they would prefer seeing that, regrouped, were fortunately successful in negotiating a deal on this private piece of land. And then before we brought any application in, brought the community together, organized bus tours to take them to see our communities, educated them on what the project will be, and then got buy-in from them. Said, well, how tall is too tall? What are some of your pressure points from a community? What kind of architecture do you like? And had the community craft the application with us. And then we applied, and I'm very proud to say that as a developer, it was the first time at a public hearing I'd ever been applauded. So the Lynbrook project had been approved a month ago, and just last night we got our variances approved. And so we'll be moving forward. So Farmingdale's successes are self-evident, but that was a process. It started with Vision in 2006, and we didn't break ground until 2013. So that was a long master planning process. I think by what I'm hearing here, and the spirit of this panel, is I think the Lynbrook story is a better story. Not a better story, but a story that I would use as a case study.
And we just had one of our panelists knew where I was going with this. So what about community opposition tends to scare off or make developers resistant to a community? Can you explain what it is about the opposition?
Well, in the social media world, I think that's everybody's enemy, and everybody's enemy is misinformation. And misinformation goes viral on these social media platforms. And people sometimes, for some reason, when something's in print, be it on a computer screen or in paper, they take it as gospel. And so I think the biggest killer for anything, be it the development community or otherwise, is misinformation and the spread of same through these, what I like to call them, the armchair warriors forums. So that's the biggest thing. We typically will hear, as a developer, very similar things repeated over and over again. We're here on Long Island, and we'll hear, of course, traffic. Well, traffic is terrible here on Long Island. But that doesn't mean we can't do anything. That's why we focus on transit hubs. Let's build near a transit hub. Let's do it smarter. We hear things about, we don't want it to be Queens. Well, look guys, 3-story buildings are not Queens. So we hear these things over and over again, and the more we're able to educate the community in a non-public hearing forum, because a lot of times you'll get those who like to get up on a soapbox and then everybody starts to cheer, and it gets sometimes a real negative energy and inertia. But in a non-public hearing forum, when we could talk in a panel setting with the designers, with the engineers, and it's much more productive, and once people understand it better, I found it's a more benign process. Does that make sense?
Yes. And so with that, we can end.
Because you got to go on vacation.
I joke about it, but that's really what it is. What we want you to take away from today, and I keep repeating it and rebuilding on it, of what the goals and the themes are of this panel. Once the community is on accord, once you have a unified voice to your elected officials, once you talking to the developer in a knowledgeable and educated fashion where you're aware of what's going on, what it is you want. A lot of times communities, we make a joke as Vision Long Island, what we have to do is play translator, because the community knows what they want, but they don't know how to explain that in zoning. And I don't know how many of you guys have enjoyed meetings with the planning department of any municipality, but they don't speak English or developer dollars. So by the time you get through the languages of all of those, you have a developer who says, you know what, this project's gonna cost me too much, I don't have the time to stick around for you guys to get it together. You have a leadership in your municipality that's not gonna survive the next election cycle, so they're not invested in your project. And you have community groups that are at each other's throats that are running their own special elections against each other, let alone who's wearing more hats in the community. So unifying your community, working with your elected officials, and then making sure that what you want, you understand the land use process, community benefit agreements, what 3 stories really do look like. Having those resources and someone to check with if you don't, or bringing someone in, not just saying Vision Long Island, hey, I'm gonna leave you guys Anthony's information, and feel free to come to explain to you. But I joke about it, but having that relationship with someone like that can explain to you, and you can take it to a facility. You know what? I want to see what that looks like. A lot of the communities that we see that aren't getting the traction they want is because some of them are just simply not in an incorporated village. We think of Farmingdale, Patchogue, Portrait, Freeport. Because they're a smaller built-in community with its own government, they tend to move faster, where unincorporated areas have more of a challenge. So you're already setting yourself 10 steps back when you start with that. So that's what we have to build in on that. Go ahead, Linda.
Can I just mention one thing? When Kings Park was deciding we need to do something, the Civic Association invited a developer in to look at the community. I asked Anthony if he would come and do a walking tour. And I think it used to be where we would be like, almost when you hear the word developer, you're thinking there's gonna be a bad, you're gonna argue with them, you're not gonna, whatever. But we knew Anthony's work, Vision had brought us to see everyone, so we invited him in. And it was probably one of the best things we did. And he said, this is what I would see here. So we had a different view. Even before we went into the process, we knew what a developer was looking at for this town, and I think it was a big help. So don't be scared of developers, meet them, talk to them, and then make the decision whether or not you think there's someone you want to work with.
One thing that the town of Islip does is every time there's a developer that wants to come into the town of Islip, I get a phone call saying, okay, they want to put in a laundromat, can you come meet the developer? Or they want to put in housing, come down, meet the developer, discuss what you want and don't want. So in town of Islip, the planning department and the town supervisor calls the civic leaders of our community into town hall to sit down with the developer before they even let them accept a proposal.
I wish they would do that in town of Hempstead. Town of Hempstead, we get little yellow signs up, we go in, and I have to say though, sometimes we've had success with that. I remember walking in and there was a gentleman who wanted to put in a laundromat. And I'm looking at them and I'm going, we don't need another laundromat. We actually have 3 laundromats, and one white laundromat was going in and it was like half a mile from 2, across the street from one and half a mile from 2 others. And I'm like, I don't understand this business model. But this gentleman was going in, he's like, I build nice buildings, and so I'm like, yeah, I have no problem with you building a nice building, but this is not what the community needs. And we happened to, his lawyer was there before we actually sat down at the zoning board hearing, and he said, would you be interested in getting together and talking about what the community would like? And I said, yes. We sat down. We're still not there yet. They're still working on it. I think the zoning overlay kind of threw them for a loop because they originally were going to go for a variance and now they're going into the zoning overlay. So they have to make sure that they're fitting into that. But we worked out a transit-oriented development. Instead of having this, another laundromat behind another parking lot facing onto Grand Avenue, and he may throw a laundromat in there someplace, I'm not so sure. But we're getting, what he was planning to do is the commercial on the bottom, a couple of stories above. We talked about, yes, density, et cetera, making sure there's appropriate parking because that's what's needed too. And we're waiting for him to do this development. But by talking, even having that chance to talk briefly before we actually got to the zoning hearing, we were able to get something that worked for both the developer and the community.
So we're gonna talk about this, I'm gonna give you guys time to talk afterwards, that's why I wanted to do this, because they're all gonna be able to give you way more questions. I just wanna give one question to you guys while you're on the panel. When it comes to, from your perspective, what are your greatest challenges or advice you can give to community groups of how you're trying to reach out and provide your resources to them, but the resistance you may encounter or your lack of access to them, whether it be continuity and them staying engaged, whatever challenges it is that they can learn from to better access the resources and things that you guys can provide them.
I like to start off. So, and it may not even be a 100% popular opinion, but the one thing I would tell all of our people in nonprofit and is that developers cannot solve all of the issues of the community they're coming in.
Cedric kicked us.
And it's a fine line because part of, I'll say this one, part of the reason why we look at them and kind of enact our rage is because nonprofits tend to be absent from a lot of the process to begin with. Okay, but we have to see, if we can focus our community organizations to see developers as a potential for investment, as a way to increase funding into the money that you already receive from government, then we could take a position of working with the developer to tweak a few things to make life better for us while we're here. 30% of something is better than 100% of nothing. If we can get one storefront that is allocated for community space, that's a great concession. And our nonprofits can take advantage of that space to further their agendas. At the same time, if a developer wants to, if a developer is looking to put in 400 plus units, okay, there is benefit for our community organizations. You have more people who can be invested into your mission, a greater base for potential donors, okay? And based on the targets on how developers are trying to market to people, they could very well be higher end potential donors to your organization. So again, all I say is that developers can't solve all of the problems, but with the right type of meeting and communication and understanding that you can get something, it may not be everything you want, but there are some concessions they would be willing to make. I think we can have projects that more organizations can buy into, and then these organizations can be better ambassadors into the community for those developers.
And I just wanna, I'm gonna let you go, I'm gonna do these two and then Debbie, I'll get to you. I just wanna add to that, I need community groups, if I say nothing else today, developers are not Santa. They're not. And that's why we say we look at them to solve our problems. What you need to look at that, when you look at a proposal from a developer, is what is your partnership level with them in an equal relationship? They want something out of your community, they want to build something. Okay, is that beneficial to your community? And you can't just look at, well, they're gonna build me a community center or they owe us this. There's certain things when you have apartments over storefronts that give your community automatic benefits because now you have those businesses operating, you have people living above them. That's a public safety benefit for you because now you have more eyes on your main street. Do you understand what I'm saying? There's certain benefits that are built into developing projects that community groups and the average person tend to not remember. So you have to remember to balance that, and then when they fall short, that's, well, you need to step up your benefit agreement, and come in harder on that. But I just want to point that out, keep that in mind. I do want to go to you guys. So as far as your outreach.
So I would think, in my experience, and I'll use the public side first and the private side. On the public side, the best thing a community can do is kind of create a vision for themselves. If you create a vision for yourselves and start building that level of certainty and kind of agreement across the board, then it's going to be much easier to convince your elected officials and your elected representatives to go along with it. It's also going to be a lot easier to attract money. So we heard about the sewers. That comes because you have strong planning. So our advice to every municipal client that we deal with and things that I worked on when I was working for the county executive, it's do a strong plan, and there's no shortcut to it. It's a lot of community meetings, it's hand-holding, it's not what you're seeing more and more of, it's not maybe a giant group meeting, you do one of them and that's it, that's the idea, and communication stops. It's identifying every stakeholder, every interest, seeing where there's commonalities, seeing where there's differences, and then educating them on the things that are realistic and the things that aren't, and why. Because I think there's this idea of, I want a public park. Okay, great, who's gonna pay for that? How is a developer gonna come in and pay for that and still have a viable project? Because you gotta remember, a lot of developers, it's not their own money coming out of their pocket, they have to attract investors and financiers. And so the project ultimately has to be profitable. But that doesn't mean that you have to go into it as a us versus them, what can I get from them necessarily. It's, how do we create a partnership? The developer wants to go in and have the community support. They're not looking to fight the community. They're their potential of a lot of these mixed-use projects. These are their potential tenants. These are their potential, renters or homeowners. So they want to have community support. They don't want to go in and have, a group that's advocating against what they're doing right off the bat. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for communities to pull together, come up with a vision, take that vision to elected officials, start finding near-term wins, find the little projects that are really going to enhance your community, identify grants that you can get to do that. And there's lots of resources out there. Suffolk County has downtown revitalization money. There's a Jumpstart program that's out there. There's a million federal programs out there. So, and I think it's similar on the developer side. They really just want certainty. Certainty is time.
I feel like Anthony's waiting to clap, but he's holding.
Well, I can just relay what I hear from all of my clients, and that's what they want. Certainty is the most important thing. They're willing to reduce the total yield of a property if they know here is the process from A to Z. Here's how much time it's going to take, and here's the end date, and here's how much it's going to cost.
I'm going to hold all the questions for 1 second because I want to just have her go, and then I'm going to get you guys in questions because I want to start Q&A after this one.
I want to talk a little bit about the vision or the way to mobilize around a message. So again, Urban League covers Nassau and Suffolk County, but our message right now is what we're calling our equity agenda. And when we use the term equity, we mean fair and just inclusion. So whoever wants to have access, they should be able to have the opportunity to have that access. So that is our agenda. And when we meet with our stakeholder groups, which we consider community organizations, civics, our elected officials, developers, business industry, LIA, we're saying equity is what we want you to consider whenever you're coming up with any sort of plan. And when we say that, we mean, okay, fine, you're coming up with all these great ideas, community and developers, for helping the community, but many times there are groups of people that are unintendedly hurt. Unintendedly, I don't even know if that's right, but whatever. They're hurt as a result of all this good intention. And what we're saying is, if we can mobilize around looking at, while you're planning and considering, looking at who can potentially be hurt, and then finding ways to limit that hurt and keep that in your plan. So our message is saying, for all groups, consider equity, consider who could possibly be hurt by all the good things that you're trying to do. And we know that this works because we know that if you help the most vulnerable, you end up helping all. There's a classic example of the sidewalk curb cut example. I don't know if you've heard this one, Angela Glover Blackwell. Basically, when they were making the sidewalk curb cuts, they did that for one particular stakeholder group, but it ended up helping those in wheelchairs, moms with strollers, someone that had, lots of shopping bags. So it ended up helping all. That's the classic example of it. So in terms of civics, if you want to unite around a message, I'm offering one to be of equity, because we do know that sometimes in all our best intentions, we do end up hurting. And if we can think about avoiding the hurt from the beginning, that would help us. And our data bears that out. And just one more thing, Tawan.
Well, you're doing that, Anthony, you might as well bring your chair up because we're starting.
The reason why, this is Urban League, but the reason why our project is the State of Black Long Island is because of our data that shows that because of all of the, well, we know about the Long Island divided and the housing and the segregation, that the Black population of Long Island has been unfairly impacted because of a lot. Education, economics, like I said. And so we're trying to close that gap, and we're saying, when you're planning, just think about those that have been left behind in all of the planning traditionally on Long Island. So hopefully that's a message that you can consider when you're, in your groups.
The only thing I wanted to add was, if you're a civic organization, most of your towns have what they call a master plan. In the master plan, you can sit, and I know in our master plan I know it's up to like $2.50 per square foot. That's what each developer donates into what they call a black box fund. And in that black box fund, we get to, as a community, use that money for our parks and recreation, our beautification, and some of the other areas. So if you are working closely with your elected officials, have them update your master plan, discuss with them. Then you're not attacking the developers, because every developer coming in is being held to the same accountability of what they have to donate into. What I know, Central ISIP, we have a black box fund. So all the development that comes into Central ISIP, all the developers are required to put in a certain amount of money per square foot, regardless of what they're building. And then we as a community get to use the black box fund for our park and recreation, for our beautification, that sort of stuff. So work with your officials on keeping your master plan updated.
And that's always something that a community can be ongoingly engaged. We're making up words now.
I know. We're making up adverbs.
But you can continuously.
Yeah.
There we go. The adverb, the etc. moral. Keep that updated and make sure it stays updated, because then you have this outdated plan and a developer will hold you to the as of right or what the existing plan is. And now you're like, well, that was, created before I was born. That's not fair. It happens. So that's something that's going to need continual maintenance. So with that, I did promise you guys 3:15. It is 3:15. So I will ask if you would like to leave, if there's anyone who would like to leave, we will not hold you for that. I'm going to, do you have a specific question for one
I just
person?
have a
or-
statement
Go ahead.
because, as you know, we know each other for a long time. Debbie, myself, and there's actually 3 other community leaders where we were all leaders of different agencies. Debbie and I were EDs of different civic agencies. And we always partnered, though we always agreed that we can agree to disagree on certain economic development that was coming into Central Islip. But we always met outside of town meeting, outside of planning, outside of IDA, because we wanted to go in there as a
United.
partnership and united as 2 biggest civic leaders, 2 biggest leaders in that community. Actually, we didn't have to be civic. But we wanted to make sure that we were in agreement, and we got a lot done, and a lot more yeses when we were able to say, we're united, we're strong, we're speaking for 30,000 people in this community, and we pushed to get things done. And again, we said on Parks Committee for the town of Islip, we didn't agree on colors on certain things. I'm like, she's like, but we worked it out before we went into a Parks meeting.
And that's what, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'd like to add that, definitely agreeing, one of the things is you need to speak up and you need to show up at the meetings, the town meetings, speak up. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to physically be there. We have become very good at getting out on social media, things about issues about our community, and saying, and here is the link where you can send your comment to the zoning board, or here is the link to send to this and that. And the last zoning board hearing, I won't go into the details, but the guy pulls up the thing and he says, and I have all of this stack of papers against, and we had 12 people there speaking on it, because, and from different, not all BCA members, not all different representations, but it's speaking up and showing up.
So I'll have you guys end with this. Just to that point, we used to make a joke about it because Gordon Heights and Bellport were always considered sister communities. And we would try and get things done. And both communities were literally ignored in this 25 from Middle Island and Quorum Renaissance that they did. So we were like, hey, you kind of drove past us like literally in the middle, that's kind of rude. So we had to get on one accord within our own community groups, and then being able to expand with a sister community to give us even more leverage was what was key. And we, as myself as a young adult, I was in like my 20s, everybody was like, who is this kid? And then we had people, I'm looking, Ruby, I see you back there, who literally had me as like a kid and taught me how to do this. I had to respect her opinion on it. But what we made sure we did as far as within our community and the communities we partnered with, you see it with Brentwood and CI, you see it with a lot of the communities that are happening, Uniondale and Hempstead will tend to work together. We treated it as siblings, where you and your brother and sister, you'd fight at home, and you'd get on each other's nerves, but you'd work it out, because when you were out together, you would not let anybody pick on your little brother or sister.
Right.
That's almost how you have to treat each other as community groups. That's your family, because that's your home. Your home isn't just, your property where you live. It's your neighborhood. It's the surrounding neighborhood, and it expands from there until universally your home is Long Island. So being that we are all sisters and brothers in communities, this is why the Lobby Coalition has been so strong for Vision Long Island. And many of the groups that we're working with are chamber alliances, because we have that brother sisterhood among our organizations that we work it out before we get to Albany. So when they try to pat us against one another, we're like, yeah, no, we all came on the same bus, sorry. Start to develop that, develop an understanding, get involved in your local community groups, attend local zoning hearings, and hear what's going on. Look at these groups in social media and see where they're having success, and if what you're looking for is realistic, and sometimes on what's not. And reach out to different developers, reach out to different projects that you see are happening, and find out what they did. Don't reinvent the wheel, copy it. Where success is happening, you can do the same. So I want to just thank you all for coming. If anyone wants to stay and network, I'm not going to stop you. I kept you 4 minutes longer than I promised. I hope this was all helpful for you all. But